We have Blas, artist and researcher, with a presentation which is titled Trip. Thank you.
Great.
For being here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm just going to share with you two artworks that I've made this year. Well, one finished in the spring, and the second project I'm in the process of completing still. Okay, so this project is called Icosahedron, and I made it for the Walker Art Center in the US. And this is the installation photo from the Walker. So this work is an interactive artificial intelligence, and I guess it kind of functions, I like to think of it as like a high fantasy around futurism and prediction. And this is not, this work is not about an image data set, it's rather about a text-based data set, or I guess a philosophical data set. So just so you know what you're looking at, this is a desk with a crystal ball on top of it with an elf that lives inside, and you can have conversations with this elf, and there is a lovely philosopher's stone on the right, which I made by following DIY YouTube videos from Harry Potter fans. If you ever want to make a philosopher's stone, you just have to get a clear quartz crystal and paint it with red nail polish. So yeah, I think of this work as it's a work about, I guess, the politics, the fantasies, and philosophies of prediction in the future that animate Silicon Valley elite. In particular, I'm very interested in this figure. I've made several works on and around him. This is Peter Thiel, the famed Silicon Valley right-wing billionaire. And I became really obsessed with this photograph of Peter Thiel at his, with his desk in the background. And it's just kind of activated a lot of fantasies for me. And I wanted to make a work about Peter Thiel and his desk. And I guess I thought I should say, just so you have a clear sense of my approach to Teal, in my 2018 film, Contra Internet Jubilee 2033, Peter Thiel is executed in the year 2033, so he's a little older, by queer militants. And here you see Ayn Rand, who's standing above him, and she has time traveled from the year 1955 to 2033 to basically bear witness to his death as like a 21st century Randian hero. So Peter Thiel co-founded this company, Palantir Technologies. This is the logo. There's so much to say about Palantir, but simply it's a data analytics company based in Palo Alto. And they have been responsible for accelerating predictive policing across the state of California, numerous dubious secret US governmental surveillance dealings, and more recently, they've been exposed as supporting ICE, which is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement in the US, and maybe you've seen the recent protests in California around Palantir's involvement with ICE this year. But when I initially began research into Palantir, one of the most striking elements of Palantir is actually where its name comes from, and which is actually from Lord of the Rings. So Palantir refused to the all-seeing crystal ball used by wizards in the Lord of the Rings. And in Lord of the Rings, the Palantir is specifically for using a crystal ball for communication and also seeing other parts of the world. So here you're seeing, this is a still from one of the Lord of the Rings films. This is the evil wizard Saruman at work with a Palantir. Now, so I wanted to make a work that dealt with all of this, and I decided to approach it through this, which is a magic 8-ball. Does anyone know, are familiar with these objects? I've just noticed that I think it's more maybe like maybe an American toy. Because I just feel like not as many people in Europe, when I ask about the magic 8-ball, know what it is. But I was a kid in the 1980s in the US, and I felt like everyone had a magic 8-ball. And you would ask it, do I have to go to school tomorrow? Will I pass my math exam? And I was interested in the magic 8-ball because in a lot of ways, it illustrates a lot of the kind of politics of prediction technologies, where it kind of, you could say the magic 8-ball obscures its material substrate. You just kind of like shake it, ask something, it gives you a response. But on the other hand, I like the Magic 8 Ball as a children's toy because I think it's serving up Silicon Valley elite the critique they deserve, which is from a child's toy. So if you open up a Magic 8 Ball, this is what you get inside when you dump out all the blue alcohol that's inside the object. You have an icosahedron, which is a 20-sided object. So basically, you've got 20 options with the icosahedron, with the Magic 8 Ball, and it's weighed towards the positive. So 10 sides of an icosahedron in the Magic 8 Ball will give you positive answers. If you ask, will I succeed at blah, 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 it'll say yes. Outcome is likely. There are 5 non-committal responses, which will be something like, try again, and then there are 5 negative or critical responses. So yeah, you've got 20 options to work with, and I was really taken by this, and it's kind of like the way that it kind of dramatizes, I guess, material constraint and pushes against the fantasy of kind of the endless ability to just predict and preempt certain futures. So I come back to this photo of Peter Thiel. And I look at his desk, and I decide I'm just going to take him at his word, and I'm going to let him become a wizard in this project and give him a crystal ball. So I think if Peter Thiel really became a wizard and he really had a crystal ball on his desk, it would look something like this. This is a Japanese AI system that was released at the end of 2017 by a company called Gatebox. And so this is manufactured in Japan, and basically, you have something that kind of looks like, a French press or some instant coffee machine, and a virtual character who's a 3-dimensional hologram named Azuma Hikari lives inside this object. And, she's not just like an Amazon Echo or Apple Siri. She has a full body and is designed to kind of function like a partner or a servant. And the company actually very specifically markets this device for single straight men. Now, with that in mind, I think, okay, who or what is the AI servant that would live inside Peter Thiel's crystal ball? Now, it can't be Azuma because she doesn't speak English. I don't think Peter Thiel knows Japanese. Plus, Peter Thiel is gay, so that kind of straight male marketing thing is not going to work on him. So I ended up arriving with this answer. An elf should be in his crystal ball. And why? Well, essentially, in Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings is kind of basically a race war. And within that world, elves are the most intelligent race. They are white, and they also live forever. And we know, if any of you follow research of Silicon Valley elite, Peter Thiel is a heavy backer for multiple radical life enhancement projects and think tanks and companies in Silicon Valley. He wants to live forever. So this really seems like a perfect match, and a real perfect match more broadly for kind of white supremacist America, which he is absolutely a part of. So this is the elf I created that lives inside Peter Thiel's crystal ball. It's kind of fleshy but mechanic, and the elf is extremely dumb. Because it's only been trained, it's been given an extremely narrow philosophical data set. And this is what you're looking at, the data set. So, and it's categorically structured like the Magic 8 Ball. So you can see there's 10 positive texts, which are basically, texts that are, let's say, pro-Californian ideology. But then what I did with the neutral section is it's mostly fiction. It's mostly fiction that has been cited as influences by a lot of Silicon Valley elite, but the fiction in and of itself doesn't necessarily automatically align, with that kind of Silicon Valley, techno, utopianism, neoliberal outlook. And then we have 5 negative options, which, I thought this structure, this was interesting for me because folding in critique into this is actually what Silicon Valley elite already do. And maybe some of you are familiar with Yuval Noah Harari, who's become like, kind of a quite popular pop tech writer. And he's a super active critic of Silicon Valley, but Silicon Valley's obsessed with him. And he's constantly invited to campuses to give talks where he critiques them. So it just seems, this structure even seems more appropriate of kind of folding in and subsuming that critical outlook. And yeah, again, like what's I think kind of important here is this is, mostly philosophy and writing and text about the future, right? Or about predicting the future. So it's about training an AI on basically, particular philosophical and political views of the future as a kind of experiment to see what will emerge from that. Okay. So here's some documentation.
The most common reaction of the human mind to achievement is not satisfaction, but craving for more. Ask me your questions about the future.
Sorry, I don't have the best documentation yet, but you'll get the...
You can see the most paramount mass incarceration within the next century. Though a border war will most likely struggle to surprisingly remain, drug dealers will most likely be the most advanced evidence. When NXTP Labs detects a white supremacy, we will see the most lovely xenophobia at the dawn of the next millennium. Nearby, you may see hate groups, but groups will most likely become less in than we could believe to snuggle. The more luxury hotels may kill, the less every clean air could unsurprisingly come. On the other hand, Congress will not be the least wise creation to dream. Within the next century, horror games will most likely decidedly engulf almost everyone. When an alleged crime's death throes relegates everyone deep into the next millennium, expect to hear of algorithms. Ask me what the only path to tomorrow is.
So, just a little taste of this work. Basically, when no one is engaging with it, it's in this kind of auto-predictive mode, which is mostly what I showed you. But then you can sit down and ask it questions, and it will give you like clunky, responses back about predicting the future. Okay, so that is the first project, and now to this much larger work that I'm making, which is called The Doors. And I've been researching this project for a number of years, and the project originated or kind of came to being through researching nootropics. Is anyone familiar with nootropics? Okay, some people. So nootropics are a massive major industry, extremely popular in America, but also the UK, I would say, probably has the second biggest industry after the US. And these are, basically commercial drugs that you can buy that are all geared towards basically, mind enhancement, about helping you kind of like focus, focus better. There's some of them that are oriented towards sleep, but they're kind of about like enhancing one's capacity to do cognitive labor at a, almost, I guess the promise is like at a kind of superhuman scale or ability. Now, so there's this whole kind of industry of commercial nootropics that you can buy, and you can kind of see, it's like Neuromaster. This Qualia bottle is from a company called the Neurohacker Collective. This is my favorite, Obedient ×3 in snow cone flavor. And so in the middle actually is LSD, because so you have a whole industry of commercial nootropics, but microdosing on LSD and magic mushrooms are actually equally as popular, especially among Silicon Valley elite. And there are tons of articles and research on this now that basically taking microdoses of LSD can have the effect of, again, enhancing one's ability to do cognitive labor. So, and there's even synthetic analogs to LSD now that, kind of float in a legal gray zone. So one is 1P LSD, which I actually just tried to get this German museum to buy, but they waited too long and it just became illegal like a month ago in Germany. But there's already a new analog syndicate of LSD called 1CP-LSD, and these analog versions of LSD are basically what people use to microdose on. So anyway, this kind of, a lot of my work over the past few years is, looking at the histories of California, its relationship to counterculture, Silicon Valley today. So I'm really interested in LSD getting re-engineered as a worker productivity drug. And I'm thinking about the culture around that. And specifically, within Silicon Valley, I start to kind of, I start to get an image or a narrative in my head. And, I start to imagine tech workers in glass architecture structures, which are supposed to bring them kind of closer to this, with this kind of harmonious relationship to nature. And I imagine them kind of microdosing, looking through these glass structures out into vast landscapes, kind of imagining, having visions about what they're going to work on and innovate and develop. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there is, I guess the work is trying to make an argument or, just suggest that we're actually living through a second great psychedelic wave, but that it actually has extremely different politics. And yeah, groups of people, kind of culturally oriented around it. So yeah, I'm interested in the trip. What is the trip on nootropics that Silicon Valley elite are engaging in? And as an artist, how can you kind of visualize that and tease out certain dynamics? So maybe interesting to note, psychedelic, the etymology is derived from the ancient Greek word psyche, which means soul, and this other word, which I'm probably going to mispronounce even though it looks really simple, delun, which means to make visible, to reveal. So psychedelia etymologically means soul revealing. So yeah, I'm interested in revealing the soul of Silicon Valley elite through a particular kind of 21st century psychedelic aesthetic. And yeah, to get to that, the question is, what kind of trip do tech workers on nootropics have? What is that psychedelic experience? And I think the way that I've kind of, where I have arrived is that I think it would look something like this, which is the output from a generative adversarial network. So, training a neural network on about 30,000 images of broken glass. This is kind of in the midst of the training. And so, there is a lot of work around neural nets and particularly GAN videos, which have become very popular, with artists. And, I'm, will fully confess this is the first work I've done, doing this kind of machine learning imagery. So I'm, I don't think I'm a dilettante, but, I'm just, I'm not that far along, let's say, with my artistic skill set. But I guess I don't think this is just about showing these images as a machine hallucination, which I see a lot of people kind of saying, watch this machine hallucinate, let's look at a GAN video. I think it's about looking at these videos as these kind of abstractions of predictions, of fantasies, of visions that are kind of in flux and coming into being. And I'm interested when certain types of people, namely tech elite, look at these kind of abstract neural net videos, what do they see? What do they imagine? What do they fantasize about will kind of come out of this? Now, I've decided to conceptually approach all of this through The Doors, through the band The Doors, which is a kind of a classic California 1960s psychedelic band that was fronted by, a dubious figure, Jim Morrison. And so I'm kind of working with the Doors conceptually with their music, also with the poetry of Jim Morrison and his kind of nicknaming himself as the Lizard King and thinking about a kind of complicated history in psychedelic culture, basically white people appropriating kind of indigenous spirituality. So, but also, like, I think what the Doors does for me conceptually is it allows a kind of reimagining of this idea of the doors of perception, this kind of classic idea of we're going to drop LSD in Golden Gate Park, have this kind of trippy communal experience, go through the doors of perception, expand our consciousness. Now I think those doors are something quite different. They could be the gates to private tech campuses. They could be the kind of interface of glass architecture that mediates a certain kind of assumed relationship to nature and landscape, particularly the American West, vastness of landscape. And also our screens. So I just think there's this kind of a lot of like open conceptual work that the Doors does when trying to make a work around all of this. So the work itself, well, it's super conceptual and there's so much. It would take me like so long to go through all of it. So I'm just going to give you like some skimming off the top. One of the things I've done is I worked with different machine learning engineers, and one of the things we did was create an AI voice based on Jim Morrison's voice. So I'll just give you kind of just play you a sense of like the training in progress. Gets a little clearer.
He favor life, he sides with death. He her last night.
Okay, so what am I doing with this voice? Well, the voice is kind of attached to this lizard that's delivering these spoken word poems that have also been generated by neural networks trained on nootropics, corporate nootropics literature, and a little bit of Jim Morrison's poetry. But so the installation looks like this. There's this symbol of sacred geometry, which is called a Metatron's cube, fabricated in artificial grass on the floor, which is kind of riffing off of certain kind of new age branding in nootropics products in California. And there are 6 screens that kind of oscillate between a CGI lizard with this Jim Morrison AI voice. And then the installation flips into another mode, which is more like a psychedelic liquid light show. So psychedelic liquid light shows were, these basically popular light shows in the 1960s with California bands. And you would basically, go and look at abstract imagery and take drugs. And the way this would work is basically layers of colored mineral oil and alcohol move under the heat of a lamp and produce kind of changing color patterns. So another thing I did basically in the installation, which I'll show you some of the video work, I created a series of songs that are also generated from neural net training. So some of those are by the Doors, some of them are like crystal bowl music, some are binaural beats. But here's a sample of training a neural net on the Doors song Light My Fire. That is way too low. Okay, I think you get the point. So what I thought I would do is I have, so this work isn't done, but it's 6 channels. I have this simulated, kind of 1-channel version, and not all the footage is in there, but I thought I would show you some of the machine learning sequences. And it's funny that Anna's not here because I was saying I have the total opposite approach. It's like the data sets are really messy, they're sloppy, they're super abstract, and the training was very short to kind of keep it in this like abstract place before, material actually starts coming into something recognizable. So, okay, so this first sequence, I'll just show you like maybe like a minute of some of these. This is different data sets. One is classic 1960s California psychedelic graphic design and imagery. Some of them are images of LSD, and some, I think 2 are images of pills. And the music is playing is basically a neural net has been trained on a couple very fast tracks by the Doors, and then that raw neural net output has been used to compose music with. So I'm just going to give you a taste of some of these. So this next section is a neural net that's been trained on binaural beats music, and all of the video work is different data sets of brain imaging. Okay, maybe I'll show you a little bit, some lizard footage. This is a glass architecture in California, the image data sets, and the music is 2 songs by The Doors, Riders on the Storm, and The End, if anyone knows those tracks. Okay, and then I'll show you this last little bit, which is the last set is actually the image set is GANs trained on images of broken glass, and actually the sound is ASMR recordings of keyboard typing. So actually training a neural network on the sound of keyboard typing, which I was interested in as a kind of sound of cognitive labor and work, weirdly kind of sounds like glass breaking at times, also sounds strangely demonic, kind of interesting. I'll let this play, and then you can see the kind of the loop at the end of this, which is the sacred geometry symbol operating as a loading symbol behind neural network videos of lizard skin generating. Okay, and the last thing to end, I will show you some of this AI poetry with
the tree of life. Dick on the loba, and the seal, L-tyrosine, caffeine, and L-tryptophan. meeting you at your garden's gate. We will tell you what to do, what you have to do to survive, to give life again. This ancient species of tree has been used for many centuries to improve the overall ability of the immune system. The tree has well known suffer from depressive stress because of the natural compound found in its roots. It is also involved in helping reborn. There you are, sore nipples and erectile dysfunction, borderline pain, abracadabra. I call about 1 year. Your brain cells still give instructions to invade and wonder. Do you dare cross the vast green water?
Okay, I think that's enough. Thanks, everyone.